comes from the Gospel of Luke, the 14th chapter, beginning with the 25th verse. Now large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate mother and father, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. "Can you tell me the way to the potter's house?" When I was a boy, there was a place not too far from here that my parents took me, and it was just a very small, almost just a shed. And in it, on the shelves, were rows upon rows of various pottery. The famous salt-glazed pottery that we associate with Williamsburg, a gray, glistening finish with the dark blue in it to highlights. And there were vases and pitchers and bowls and plates, all sorts of implements that had been fashioned by the potter. And at the end of the shed, there he was with his wheel. He would take a lump of clay, moisten it to the right consistency, and with his thumbs, he would begin to make it take shape. I was fascinated. As I watched him, he would take it up, and sometimes it would become a vase, and he would work it, and then he would slice it, take it off the wheel, and put it aside, and then he would begin. And every once in a while, he would bring up a shape, and somehow either the clay had a flaw in it, or he put too much pressure and it got real wobbly, and oh my, he would just whoosh, push it back down again, reform it, and then start over. And then occasionally he would work and work with the clay. The clay had too many flaws. He would just pick it up and toss it in a bucket and get new clay and begin working. Can you tell me how to get to the potter's house? God tells Jeremiah to go to the potter's house. And there he has Jeremiah, much as I did. Oh, by the way, that little pottery shed ended up becoming Williamsburg Pottery. And back in that day, it was just one little shed. And shelves had nothing on it but the salt glazed pottery. Many of you remember how it grew and became warehouses and buildings. And not only could you get pottery, you could get the latest plaster of Paris stick from Mexico or South America. You could get good prices on china and glasses. It was a huge enterprise. And most of the women in the state would drag their husbands to the Williamsburg Pottery that had started out as a shed, not much more than 200 square feet. Can you tell me how to get to the potter's house? Well, thank you. You're taking me literally. I appreciate that. I hear it's reopened, but it's only a ghost of its former self. Jeremiah is sent to go to the potter's house, and so he goes down the hill to find the potter. Very unusual. Usually when God calls Jeremiah to listen to him, he's going to tell him something right there. And so Jeremiah's attentive. And instead, God says, Jeremiah, go down to the potter's house. Can you tell me how to get to the potter's house? Jeremiah goes. He stands, and as he's watching that potter form the material, just as I described seeing as a boy. As he looks at it, he says, see the potter, how the potter shapes that clay. Thus I will do to Israel. I will shape and I will form them if they allow me. But if they refuse or seek to constantly make their own shape without my guidance, I will squash them down and I will reform them. But if they listen to me and allow the hands of God to shape and form them as I intend, then goodness and mercy shall flow. Can you tell me how to get to the potter's house? We are called to allow God to form us, to transform us, to shape us as God wishes to shape us. Not according to just our desires, but God's desires for us. We are all lumps of clay on God's pottery wheel. And throughout our life, we are called to receive and feel the hands of God shaping us, molding us in our character, in our being. No matter what we face in life, we are called to feel and accept the hands of God shaping us, forming us to be the human being God wishes us to be. Now, Jesus comes along and he tells us that unless you give up and hate your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, you can't be his disciple. And I know many people have been very disturbed by that passage. Jesus is exaggerating to make a point. He is basically saying, unless you allow yourselves to primarily be formed and shaped by the love of God, unless your love of God, your willingness to allow God to shape you and form you happens, then you can't be my disciple, because you will be following other things. And the love that you claim to have for your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your own children, the love that you claim to have will not be shaped by God's love, and will become destructive, not satisfying. We have to be shaped by the love of God. We have to be formed by God's will in order to be a disciple of Jesus. Can you tell me how to get to the potter's house? This past week, there was the news story about Ariel Castro, the man who imprisoned these 3 women for 10 to 12 years. He killed himself in his prison cell by hanging himself with the sheets. He was someone that did not allow the love of God or the shaping of God's hands to form him. Instead, in the darkness of his heart, he followed a different path, a destructive path, and almost destroyed the lives of 3 women. When he found that he was going to serve what amounted to the rest of his life in prison, 1,000 years, he couldn't take it. He couldn't handle it. Just the few weeks that he was in prison, isolated, because they knew if they put him in the prison population, the other prisoners would kill him. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle the same kind of abuse he had handed out to these 3 innocent women. And so he took the coward's way out and killed himself. In his choices in life, he resisted the hands of the potter to form and shape him. He resisted, and now he's dead. And yet the 3 women, no matter the abuse, the horrifying tales that have come out about what they went through, have come out with a sense of strength and survival that indicate that even in the midst of their horrifying experience, of the abuse, of the torture, of the beatings, in the midst of that, they bonded together. They were formed not by the evil of Mr. Castro. They were formed and shaped by the love that they developed for each other to hang on and to survive. And now have come out with a lot of recovery, but with a sense of resiliency and inspiration that shows there were hands of the Lord forming and shaping them even in the midst of the horror. Can you tell me how to get to the potter's house? Jesus says, unless we are willing to carry a cross and give up our possessions, we can't be his disciple. Jesus describes what it means to become a vessel shaped by God. Giving up being so selfish and self-absorbed. Giving up having everything in our life shaped by the world around us, rather than according to how God wishes to shape us and how God wishes us to live. Instead of resisting how God wants to mold and shape us and perhaps reform us, many of us follow a path that will only end up with our shape either being destroyed and remade or discarded. The cross indicates that allowing Jesus in our life as the embodiment of our potter. Jesus, in a sense, has been sent by God to be the potter who makes us, who remakes us, who reforms us, who shapes us into the human being that God wants us to be. Jesus is the embodiment of our potter. And by being shaped by Jesus, what that means, by letting go of our worldly and self-absorbed obsession with things of the world, it means we're going to have encounters in life as we are shaped, where we're going to have difficult choices. There are going to be times when we have to give up or let go of something in order to submit to the shape that Jesus is forming us in. Can you tell me how to get to the potter's house? You and I live in a world that encourages us to believe that easy street, easy life is our right. Even the church today spends more time encouraging us to consider what we will gain in blessings, possessions, and the adoration of others than mentioning any possibility that we have to carry a cross. And the result is, in the world that you and I live in, is we've become unskilled, misshapen, cheap vessels that are less formed by God and the cross than by our own selfishness. I've mentioned this before. When I go in the supermarket and I'm waiting for checkout, I always scan the magazines. And currently, everyone's in a flap about the new baby born to William and Kate, the royals in England. And I think that's wonderful. But the way they promote it in these gossip magazines, you'd think this... And there's always a magazine with one of the Kardashians on the front. And now we're going to see lots of magazines with Miley Cyrus on the front as the debate goes on about her performance at the Music Awards. You can go down the rack and see all of these beautiful people, glamorous people, the movie star couple of the week, the couple that's marriage is breaking up, all these people whose claim to fame and our attention is simply that they have made a life of being famous. Now, to be fair, many of the stars today who have become famous and wealthy are sensitive to the needs of others and have established grants and foundations where they give a lot of their wherewithal to help people. But most of the people on the covers of these magazines that I see are purely famous because they appear glamorous. They appear interesting, or they've involved themselves in scandal. You know, I'm kind of missing Paris Hilton. I haven't seen her on many magazine covers, but boy, I sure have seen a lot of Kim Kardashian. And Lindsay Lohan, bless her heart, or Britney Spears. We've become preoccupied not with the things of God that wish to form us, that make us into vessels that will promote and share God's love, but instead we have elevated people whose claim to fame is they've done nothing but become famous or appear glamorous. If you measure the lifestyle of these people and see what they have done for their fellow human being against the fame and the glory that they are promoted all over the place, I think the balance would not be too good. And yet, you and I eat it up. We watch the reality shows. We watch American Idol. It's a great title. Who will be the next American Idol? We look at our football heroes. We look at our athletes, and we hold them in high esteem. Stadiums right now all across America are packed with people cheering on their team, spending money and doing things. The preoccupation right now with college and professional sports is incredible. Can you tell me how to get to the potter's house? When you open a newspaper, when you look at the magazines for sale, do you see on the cover someone who has become well known because of their love, because of their sacrifice, because of their willingness to give of their life to be shaped by the love of God, so that it makes a difference in someone's life? It makes a difference in a people's life. Can you name someone today? Call it out. Someone who is famous. Billy Graham. Do you see him on many magazine covers? No. Who? All right. There are a couple of stars that have made an example, very controversial in their lifestyle, but they have made an example of being invested in the poor and the needy in India and in Africa. Yes.
Mother Teresa and Pope Francis.
Mother Teresa and Pope Francis. Mother Teresa is no longer with us, but Pope Francis. Do you see him on many magazine covers? No. Not too many. Anyone? Can you think of someone just springs to your mind of someone who has gained the love of millions, not by their glamour or their self-glory, but by the love that they have shared? Kate Middleton? The princess? Okay. I'm not so familiar with some of the things. I know that her simplistic lifestyle. Boy, I'd like that simplistic lifestyle. I think that's
Me, I'm not on a magazine.
yeah, Betty's not on a magazine. The point I'm trying to make as I try to find the potter's house is that right now there's a doctor in India who has dedicated his life and his training to serving the needs of the afflicted and the poor and their diseases, and who spends hours each day. He is not looking for a beautiful home, a swimming pool, a lifestyle that he could very easily get if he had stayed here. But he has gone into some of the most poverty-stricken areas to share his love. Right now, in Africa, there are teachers who have left their homes, traveled across the ocean, and given themselves to educating the children of Africa. Not for glory or lots of money or prestige, but because they felt a calling. They felt the hands of Jesus molding and shaping them and saying, I am training and preparing you for great work. The point is, we have people all around us who are giving of themselves and their time and their personhood, their very life, to express and live the love of God. And because of it, they are suffering. Because of it, they are bearing a cross, but they do it willingly. Because they have been shaped by the hands of God, by Jesus Christ. Can you tell me the way to the potter's house?